All right, hello everybody. What we're gonna do here is I'm just gonna go through the notes with you. This video will be the Bill of Rights amendments. It'll be amendments 1 through 10. The next one will be 11 through 20, and the last one will be 21 through 27. And then you will eventually have a quiz over it, but we'll review it a bunch. First, how you will get graded these next 3 days is by filling out the amendment sheet that's on PowerSchool, so that I know you kind of followed along and have some idea what they all are. So anyway, there are 27 amendments, so we will get going right with one. The first amendment is RAPS. That's how I say it, RAPS. It is your freedom of religion, assembly, press, petition, and speech, RAPS. So, religion means that we do not discriminate based on religion in this country. You are allowed to freely practice whatever religion you decide to. Assembly means that you are allowed to legally gather, unless there is a major reason, coronavirus, that you are not allowed to gather. But most of the time, you are allowed to. Freedom of the press, so the government cannot throw someone in jail because they don't like the story that they ran. The press is free here. Petition, people are allowed to vote how they see fit. People are allowed to kind of give their opinion that way. And then the First Amendment is known for the best, is your freedom of speech. Most speech in this country, obviously there are going to be some forms of speech that aren't, but most speech in this country is free speech. Even hate speech is covered mostly under the First Amendment. So the idea that you are allowed to express your ideas as you see fit. On the Second Amendment. Second Amendment is probably one of the more famous. It is your right to bear arms. The nice way to remember this is that bears have 2 arms. I know, it's pretty exciting here. So your right to bear arms is your right to own, usually we say it as guns. There's a court case called DC versus Heller. This makes it an individual right. For a long time, it was kind of up in the air. Is it your individual right to own guns, or is it a collective to form a militia right? But in DC versus Heller, they decided this was your individual right to own guns. But obviously, like all the amendments, they're allowed to make laws that restrict it in the same way that, you can't really gather right now with the First Amendment. We won't watch that video. Moving right along is with the Third Amendment. So the Third Amendment deals with the quartering of troops during peacetime is not allowed. So this is a direct result. Third Amendment here. It's kind of hard to see, I guess. The Third Amendment here. During the Revolutionary War, right before the Revolutionary War, Great Britain was forcing the colonists to have soldiers live in their home. So this is a result, quartering, of that. So when they came up with the Bill of Rights, when they were arguing for it and against it and everything, they said, well, we want to be protected against being forced to quarter troops. So the Third Amendment, the quartering of troops during peacetime is not allowed. There's not going to be some soldier coming on your door and be like, hey, I'm going to be living with you now. That is not really a thing anymore. So the Third Amendment is one of those amendments that doesn't totally apply, but at the time it was kind of a big deal. Kind of, big thing. All right, Amendment 4. Amendment 4 is against unreasonable search and seizure. So the reason I have a boat here is because it is the Unreasonable Search and Seizure Amendment, the USSA. See what I did there? And the reason it's on a boat is because that's how you title boats. So the Unreasonable Search and Seizure Amendment makes it so known situations where a warrant is not needed includes hot pursuits, consent, plain view, border and airport searches, emergency situations, and then if there's probable cause in a vehicle, it can be searched. But if none of those are applied, then you have your protection of unreasonable search and seizure. So if a police officer knocked on my door right now and said, hey, I'm going to search your house, and they don't have a warrant, I can say no. And if they were to come into my house anyway and say that they found something, that wouldn't hold up in court. So the Unreasonable Search and Seizure Amendment protects you. This, again, is a direct result of the Revolutionary War. You have all these Revolutionary War people trying to get their war going, get it started, founding fathers. It's kind of hard to do that when you have no right against unreasonable search and seizure. So they put this amendment in with it. Alrighty. 5 is a big one. 5 has a lot going on. So kind of bear with me here. So the first thing that it does, and see, I draw them all on the 5 here. You see that? See that? Oh, see? Okay. So the first thing is your right against self-incrimination. That's the idea of pleading the fifth. You have the right to plead the fifth to protect yourself against self-incrimination. So, for instance, you don't have to answer any questions that you don't want to. You don't have to talk if you don't want to at any point. That's pleading the fifth. The second one, ED, is eminent domain. Eminent domain is the idea that the government is allowed to buy private property. If it's a reasonable price they give, they're allowed to buy private property if it's for the public good. So if they want to widen a road, but there's a bunch of houses on that road, they can buy those houses, force the people to sell, and then they're allowed to widen the road because that would be for public good. So that's eminent domain. The next one we have here is GJ. This is a grand jury. The grand jury decides if there's enough evidence to hold a trial. Decides if there's enough evidence to hold a trial and kind of sets the rules for how that will go. So they're going to decide if there's enough evidence. If so, the person then will be formally charged with the crime or indicted, and then the formal trial will happen. But first, there's going to be a grand jury, and that grand jury is going to decide, yes, there is enough evidence that you did this. Or no, we don't think so, and we're not going to waste time with a trial. Alrighty, fourth thing, DJ is double jeopardy. Double jeopardy is a big thing. Basically how it works is you cannot be found guilty or innocent of the same crime twice. So if there's a hung jury or a mistrial, this doesn't apply. But if you have an entire court case and then that jury says, no, we think that you're innocent, you're done. You cannot be tried for that crime again. So O.J. Simpson, he definitely did it. But they found him innocent. He could have stood up right then and there and been like, joke's on you, I did it. Because we have no double jeopardy. You can't be tried for that same crime again. You can't be found guilty or innocent for it. So it doesn't matter if they found the murder weapon the next day. It doesn't matter what they find afterwards, doesn't matter what you say afterwards. If you're found innocent by a jury, you will not be tried again. Again, that does not apply to hung juries. It does not apply to mistrials. All right. The last one is DP. That's due process. Due process is the idea that there's a set standard way of going about criminal proceedings. So under all circumstances, your rights are going to be said to you. You have everything spelled out for you, both if you're an adult or a kid, that it's all going to follow the same scope. All right, on to 6. Oh, see, here's another drawing now. Fancy drawings. Yes. 5 things for 5. All right. On to 6. The 6th Amendment is for a speedy and public trial. It's for an impartial jury of your peers. You have to be informed of the crime. You have the right to confront any witnesses. You have the right to call any witnesses. And the big one, you have a right to counsel. So that was kind of a lot again. But you have the right to a speedy public trial. Your court date can't be set for 5 years from now or 10 years from now. There has to be a reasonable, quick trial set up. It has to be a public trial. People have to know about it. It can't be in some dungeon in the middle of the night. You get the right to an impartial jury. So juries are selected at random. They're going to ask the jurors questions when they get there to make sure they're not super biased against you, or at least they're going to try to. You have to be informed of the crime. They're going to sit you down. They're going to say, this is the exact crime we're trying you with. You have to know what it is. You have the right to confront any witnesses. So whoever's saying, I saw him do it, I analyzed the drugs, they're definitely drugs, whoever it is, you have the right to confront them, know who they are. You have the right to call witnesses in your defense. And then you have the right to counsel. That's a big one. You have the right to your own attorney. And one of the court cases we'll look at in a couple weeks is that idea that even if you can't afford one will be appointed to you. All right, so that's 6th speedy trials. There's another drawing. It's pretty exciting. Alrighty. 7 is a weird one. So I'm just going to do it really fast. 7's strange. So 7's this. In civil suits over $20, a right of trial by jury is preserved. So if you have a civil suit for more than $20, which in 2020 is probably what it's going to be, you have the right to trial by jury. So 7 is for civil suits, $20 more. There's a suit. See, 7 civil suits. Got it. So there's a drawing. Good stuff. Okay, number 8. 8 is your protection against what's considered cruel and unusual punishments. So if you make a P for punishments, you can put a C and a U and an 8 around it. And you see that's how you can remember. Cruel and unusual punishments are protected under the 8th Amendment. So some forms of the death penalty have been found as being cruel and unusual, and then we don't use them anymore. And then other forms of the death penalty are not considered cruel and unusual, and we can still use them. The 8th Amendment also protects you against excessive bail and fines. So if you steal a stick of gum, they're not going to set your bill at $10,000 or something crazy. It has to be, reasonable. So, yeah. Can't get tarred and feathered anymore. Kind of sad. 8th Amendment. Alrighty. Your 9th Amendment, these are the rights that the people have that are not listed in the Constitution. Your Ninth Amendments are all the rights not specifically mentioned in the Constitution. The biggest of these rights is your right to privacy. That is the amendment that Roe v. Wade, the abortion case, is argued under, is your ninth. It is your right to protection. So that would also fall under things for like wiretapping, can be argued under the ninth. But anything not specifically mentioned in the Constitution is then argued under the ninth. Alrighty, and then the last one for this video is the 10th Amendment. And the 10th Amendment protects powers reserved to the state. So this amendment guarantees the state certain rights that aren't listed in the Constitution. For instance, the states get to decide things like divorces, the driving age, marriages, schools, and things like that. This was a necessary amendment for passing the Bill of Rights because it made all the small state people willing to sign it and be like, okay, so we as a state still get these certain rights. The important thing to remember here, though, is while we have the 10th Amendment and while it says, yep, states' rights, there's also something called the Supremacy Clause. And the Supremacy Clause is the idea that when the state government and the federal government go up against each other, federal government always wins. If you remember way back to the start of this class, we talked about it with marijuana laws. So in the federal government's eyes, it's illegal. In the states, they can try to make it legal, but at the end of the day, it's still illegal in the federal government's eyes. They get to decide. So, for instance, too, the states get to decide how to do marriage license, but when the federal government came in and said, hey, gay marriage is legal now, that wasn't up to the states. The states then had to marry same-sex couples. So anyway, those are the first 10 Bill of Rights amendments. Please let me know if you have any questions.